PillNet asked me to come and share with you a little bit my personal journey into doing anti-trafficking work. I'm an ex-corporate lawyer, and also how pro bono has helped me further the work that I do. So please bear with me as I take you through my own personal journey. So people often ask me, how did you end up doing this kind of work? And on reflection, how does one end up doing counter-trafficking work? The answer is pretty simple. If you are exposed to the level of control, coercion, deceit, and exploitation, the extreme disempowerment and commodification of people that is involved in forced labor and human trafficking and slavery situation, it's hard to remain unmoved. If you ever stop long enough and look in the mirror, look past your reflection, you might just about see the faces of all those who have worked in conditions of forced labor and slavery to produce the disposable fashion that we wear, to produce the cheap and competitively priced food that we eat, the electronic gadgets we use. Slavery is an integral part of our lives today. We may choose to look the other way, but for the 21 million slaves in the world today, looking the other way is simply not an option. When you recognize the close proximity of slavery, trafficking, and forced labor to our daily lives, whilst acknowledging its devastating effect on communities and individuals involved, it is hard to be unmoved and stand by and watch. The first trafficking case I ever encountered broke my heart. It was a brutal account of rape, beatings, substance abuse, imprisonment. And it really pushed me to find within myself ways in which I could make a difference in my own modest ways. I guess the anti-slavery sentiment has always been a part of my DNA. My family originates from Bihar in India. Bihar is one of the poorest states of India. It's littered with mica mines, which are home to hundreds of thousands of child slaves. Also, there's a very large population of Dalits, or the untouchables, who are exploited for sex and for forced labor in Bihar. Slavery was all around me, but I grew up fairly protected from it. I was born and brought up in Mauritius. Mauritius was built on the labor of slaves and indentured laborers. And I guess over the years, as I grappled with my own knowledge of how to fight slavery, my Indian heritage, but also my upbringing in Mauritius, brought me a lot of strength. After the first trafficking case I worked on, the others followed thick and fast. Patterns emerged, profiles, characteristics, and there was so much to do around finding different ways to support these people. The cases, by and large, presented very common characteristics of individuals who were broken by coercion, deception, violence, restriction on freedom of movement, and extreme abuse of vulnerabilities. And for the first time since I qualified as a lawyer, and by that time I'd done about 7 years of corporate law, I really started to feel like a lawyer. I felt like I finally understood. The penny had dropped. This is what the law does. This is what happens in practice. And I could really see the practical application of the law, particularly in protecting vulnerable segments of society and holding those accountable who were in power. But I also became painfully aware of the failings of the law, problems with enforcement, and of restricted access to justice. My corporate beginnings were certainly a tremendous source of strength for me. And after a few years in mergers and acquisitions, I came to my various anti-trafficking roles with super drafting skills, presentation skills. I could negotiate, I could project manage, all singing, all dancing monkey, really. And people, and particularly students and activists, will always ask, well, if you could go back and change it, would you do it differently? And my answer is always, I would still start life as a corporate lawyer, because it gave me the tools that I use today that help me make a difference and serve clients to the best of my ability. I certainly didn't enjoy at 10 p.m. on a Thursday evening being shouted at by a partner because I'd missed a comma on page 128 of a share purchase agreement. And I remember in those moments thinking, is there a point to any of this? But there was a point. With a corporate background, decent experience in the anti-trafficking space in the UK, I moved to Hong Kong 6 years ago. New beginnings, new terrain to navigate. I had my work cut out. Over half of the world's slaves live and are exploited in Asia. I became a mother for the first time, and that took me on a different journey altogether. I guess it taught me to look beyond boundaries, to stop being defined by the title of head of legal, to stop being defined by the boundaries that people had prescribed for what I could do and what I couldn't do. I joined Liberty Asia. I threw myself into fundraising, brand building, raising awareness, working on cases, training police officers, advising governments, and before I knew it, I was working in Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam too. But for the first time, I felt at home. I felt at peace, I had found my niche, and I was finally playing to my strengths. This niche really is a unique space which bridges the gap between the private sector and the NGO world, and it is made possible by the strong pro bono relationships that I have with a number of firms that support our work in Asia. Being the only lawyer at Liberty Asia was not about to rein in the ambitions we had for legal empowerment and redress work. My corporate origins actually made it easier to relate to law firms, to understand their culture, their internal controls and processes. I learned how to package and present projects that would appeal to different law firms depending on their areas of expertise, but also in line with their global pro bono ambitions. And despite this, my first point of contact or connection with the lawyers was always education about trafficking and slavery. And once you're exposed to this, it's very difficult to stand away. And in fact, lawyers, law firms, and their support staff have much to contribute. Engagement with the private sector has also meant engagement with corporates, for example, Thomson Reuters, who have a real heart for the issue of slavery and human trafficking. Working with colleagues at Liberty Asia, we found ways to weave our anti-slavery expertise and knowledge through their different work streams and their different products. An example of a successful outcome of this relationship is the fact that we have, over the last 2 months, contributed over 200 names and typologies of individuals and organizations involved in slavery to their WorldCheck database. For those of you who don't know WorldCheck is a database that is used by over 4,000 banks across the world. And it's basically the place to go when banks are checking on new client details or monitoring existing transactions. And it presents a very powerful way of confining the way traffickers can bank and multiply their wealth. It is well documented that as traditional criminal justice responses fall short of dismantling trafficking rings, they fall short of protecting victims and offering them compensation, there is a compelling need to look for more innovative solutions. One such solution is certainly following the money trail and making it difficult for traffickers to bank their profits and multiply their wealth. Law firms, commercial law firms in particular, have worked with us on exploring the definition of proceeds of crime and on looking at the best way to really improve the visibility of anti-trafficking within this context. We have worked together on understanding the interface between existing anti-money laundering regimes and that have allowed us to help inform discussions with financial regulators. The lawyers who supported us on this project applied skills and knowledge that they use for their daily job in the commercial world to help improve the visibility of human trafficking within existing legal frameworks. It has put us in a position to sit on par with a number of banks and financial institutions and tell them that they need to take human trafficking, forced labor, and slavery seriously. If you start hitting the traffickers where their pockets are, it really hurts them. It wasn't plain sailing working with commercial lawyers on this, and there were many challenges, including a lot of nervousness around potential conflicts that would appear, particularly in relation to existing clients. This resulted in delay. There were often strained conversations, but my husband will tell you I tend to prevail in a strained conversation, so we find a way around it. But lawyers are also the keepers of the justice system. The lawyer and mother in me were outraged when on a trip to Thailand, I witnessed firsthand the devastation of child trafficking for slavery. These children were trafficked as young as age of 4. They were drugged, they were beaten, they were disease-ridden and made to service pedophiles. They are frequently jailed for criminal offenses that are committed as a direct result of having been trafficked. And in the detention centers, they face multiple issues in accessing justice. For those who come to the attention of the police and who are non-Thai, those children are actually treated as illegal aliens and driven to borders twice a week and left at the borders. It just beggars understanding. How can a 4-year-old who has all the indicators of having been trafficked, who has traveled from Cambodia to Thailand alone, be considered to be an illegal alien? It made no sense. And if the trafficker is not arrested right next to the child, then the child is not recognized as a victim of trafficking. These children are not only failed by families, they're failed by the society, and they're failed by law, because the law actually recognizes jail as a safe place in Thailand. With the support of the Allen and Overy Global Foundation, we hired 2 child protection officers who are now working with a partner organization in the field to ensure that the best protection of these children is taken care of. But we've also assembled a formidable team of lawyers to actually look at this issue between the conflict between immigration law and child protection law. They're looking at innovative practices in other jurisdictions. How did other countries deal with this? And about ways in which strategic litigation could also be a potential outcome. The idea really is to include a real-time case review of actual cases, to do a literature review, to do a comparative jurisdictional analysis, and out of all of this will be pulled out a 2-page policy document which we're well placed to socialize with the Thai government. As many of you will know, there's a lot of scrutiny on Thailand at the moment, so the time is right to be advocating for change. Child protection is a highly specialized area. There was nervousness around, will we be able to do this, and how will we manage? It's a big project. But this has not held back efforts. I've always also been drawn to the concept of empowerment as a prevention tool. Maria talked about prevention as being really important. Much of our work has focused on empowering NGOs and frontline responders in understanding areas of law that are relatively unknown to them. Within this, I include anti-corruption, anti-money laundering. We're currently working with Ropes and Gray and McDermott, Will and Emery on creating a toolbox that will allow NGOs working in Southeast Asia to actually understand how to use extraterritorial laws that come out of the US or come out of the UK to basically hold traffickers accountable for what they're doing. In addition to this, we offer a lot of trainings which really cover a whole range of issues, from identification of victims and using legal frameworks to protect victims and non-criminalization issues. The trainings offer a great opportunity to actually place at the center of all of our work victim care and protection. Working with a number of law firms, we've put out a lot of best practice, which has also helped people working on the front line work better with survivors. And they also allow other stakeholders, like the private sector, to engage with human trafficking as a crime of many crimes, and to incorporate this slavery awareness through the daily work. So if you are a lawyer thinking there is not much that you can do to help, here are some emerging areas. The right to compensation, which has been a recurring theme this morning, direct legal representation, strategic litigation, expunction of criminal records, which is a big issue, assistance with criminal matters, and support with advocacy on behalf of survivors. Corporate lawyers who understand the issue of slavery are in a much better position to advise their clients on slavery in the supply chains. And this can help avert reputational damage, but by the same token, foster a real culture where labor rights are respected for multiple people. Every stakeholder has a very essential role to play in the fight against slavery. We talked yesterday about the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, eradication of slavery is also one of them. The challenges abound and the successes are few. But I've always drawn strength from the resilience of the survivors, as demonstrated by Princess this morning. Away from the front lines, it is so easy to forget that behind the 21 million statistics, there are real people who are suffering. Legal work in this space should really be inspired by empowerment of survivors and those vulnerable to exploitation, by access to justice, and by the ability to help survivors transition out of the vicious circle of trafficking. Empowerment and redress is also about helping survivors to join the advocacy movement and to help themselves and others. The survivor voice is often silenced by struggles to survive and to rehabilitate, or by the complexities of the criminal justice system. I'm short on time, so I was about to go into my frustrations working with law firms. I guess I won't do that. As human trafficking rears its ugly head through war zones, areas struck by natural disasters, villages consumed by poverty, and global supply chains, the imperative to take action is today stronger than ever before. A $150 billion business, it is one of the fastest growing forms of organized crime. And a much needed response would be a global and a multi-stakeholder response. Lawyers and law firms are very well placed to assume a very important role in this fight. I've talked a great deal, and promise this is the last paragraph. I've talked a great deal about lawyers as stakeholders and the contribution they can make to the fight against human trafficking. Every lawyer comes from a different background, with different areas of expertise, from different circumstances. Some are thriving, others are struggling. Whether you're a man or a woman, a partner or a paralegal, at the top of your game or struggling, the one unifying feature between all of us is our humanity. This is also what links us to the 21 million men, women, and children who are today living and working in conditions of slavery. We have choices, but those who are enslaved don't. I say we use our freedom and our ability to make choices to help eradicate slavery. My anti-trafficking work has taken me beyond the realm of being a lawyer, and it is today a part of me and my identity, a part of the legacy that I will leave my children. Every day, I get to stand up for what I believe in. To my NGO colleagues who are here and to the law firm friends who are here, please roll up your sleeves and get stuck in. For so many people and in so many respects, tomorrow will be too late. I leave you to think about a quote from Martin Luther King that keeps me going on a dark day. So it goes, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one, affects all of us indirectly." Thank you.
Thank you, Archana. That was fantastic. And if anybody would like to hear more, as I'm sure you would, there will be an anti-trafficking workshop happening next door right now in Sala Raffaello. As you may have noticed, we're running a tad late, behind schedule. I'm sure you will all agree it was absolutely worth it. But what I will ask is that when we go to coffee break after the next set of workshops, that you grab a coffee and bring it back down so that we can try and make up some time. As Atanas already mentioned this morning, we have some very specific limitations around our closing plenary. So run to your next workshop and we'll try to make up some time somewhere.